All right, let's talk about two tiny words you probably use 100 times a day, in and into. And I know it sounds like a basic grammar lesson, right? But the difference between just being somewhere and actively going somewhere, well, that's everything. It's the difference between being static and being in motion. And it's way more than just grammar, it's actually a pretty powerful guide for moving your life forward.
So think about this for a second. In that first part, you're in the garden, you're just describing a location, where you are, that's it. But when you walk into the house, something has changed. You're describing an action, a transition from one place to another. This simple little sentence really holds the key to this whole idea. It's that core difference between just your position and actual movement.
Okay, so let's break this down. Our source text, Practical English Usage, puts it really clearly. In is all about position. It's static. It's just where something is. But into, that's where all the magic happens. Into is all about movement. It's dynamic. It's the shift from outside to inside, from one state to a totally new one. And this is where into gets really interesting, because it goes way beyond just physical movement. It signals transformation. A frog changes into a prince, that's a total makeover. A document gets translated into Chinese, its whole form changes. You enter into an agreement, what was just a conversation is now a binding deal. And yeah, even poor granny driving into a tree, that's a dramatic change of state for both of them. Into is the word we reach for when one thing becomes something else entirely.
So this isn't just a grammar quirk. This distinction is absolutely fundamental to one of the most important things we do as humans, communicate. So think about it for a second. When you speak, are you just talking in a room, or are you actively moving your ideas into the hearts and minds of the people listening? Let me tell you a quick story about this. It's from Talk Like TED, about the human rights lawyer Brian Stevenson. He was in court, having a really terrible time with a judge, when a courtroom janitor walked into the room just to whisper this incredible encouragement to him.
And that one moment was a complete game changer for Stevenson. He suddenly realized that to persuade these skeptical judges, he couldn't just stand there and present facts in the courtroom. No, he had to move his story into their hearts. You see the parallel? Just like that janitor moved into the room and changed Stevenson's entire mindset, Stevenson learned he had to move his stories into the courtroom to change the entire system.
And that's really what it all boils down to. Effective communication is an act of movement. It's not about just being physically present in a space. It's about moving an idea, an emotion, a story, into the soul of another person. That's the difference between just talking and actually making a connection. Okay, so let's take this in versus into idea and switch gears completely. Let's apply it to personal finance. When you think about building wealth, are you focused on the state you're currently in, or are you focused on actively moving into a state of financial freedom?
So in the book, The Millionaire Next Door, we meet a guy named Bob. He's a stockbroker, makes a good living, and his big goal is to become wealthy. But when he gets some advice on buying a house, his biggest concern isn't the investment potential. Nope, it's all about the social status of the neighborhood he'd be in.
And this just perfectly illustrates the mindset trap. Bob was obsessed with the static state of being in a certain type of neighborhood. It was all about his current status. But the actual millionaire mindset, it's totally dynamic. It's focused on the movement, the process of moving into financial independence, no matter where you have to start from.
I mean, this quote really says it all, doesn't it? Bob's focus on who he was and where he was in that specific moment was the biggest obstacle to his goal of moving into a new financial future. He was so fixated on a static image of himself that he couldn't take the dynamic steps he needed to actually transform his life.
So we've seen this play out in communication and in wealth. What about at work? How do you move a skeptical boss or a hesitant client into a new way of thinking? Well, the 4-Hour Workweek has this brilliant little technique for that.
It's called the puppy dog close, and the name is perfect. It comes from pet stores trying to help a family that's on the fence about getting a puppy. Instead of pushing for that massive, lifelong commitment, the salesperson makes a much simpler offer. The goal isn't the final sale, not yet. The goal is a simple, low-risk movement into a trial run.
The strategy is genius. First, you propose a small, low-risk trial. You're not trying to force a huge decision. You're just trying to get a foot in the door. By making the barrier so low, you make it incredibly easy for someone to move from a state of no into a state of maybe. And what you find is that temporary trial very often just becomes a permanent change. This right here is the magic phrase. It's not sign here for 15 years of vet bills, it's just try it out. That simple suggestion completely reframes the entire decision. It's not a scary leap anymore, it's just a tiny reversible step. It melts away resistance and turns it into curiosity, making the move from not having a puppy into temporarily having a puppy feel totally effortless and safe.
So you see the pattern here, right? From how we talk to each other, to how we build wealth, to how we make changes at work, it keeps coming back to the same idea. The difference between being stuck and actually making progress so often boils down to that subtle but really profound difference between in and into. One describes your condition, the other describes your decision to change it.
Let's just boil it all down to this one powerful sentence. Being in a situation, in a job you don't like, in a financial rut, in a communication breakdown, that's your current state. It's where you are. But moving into something new, into a better career, into financial health, into a deeper connection, that is always a choice. It's an act of will. It's a decision to move.
And so that really brings us to the final and most important question of all. I want you to look at your own life, your work, your relationships, your goals. Where are you just existing in a state you want to change? And what's the first small step you can take today to start moving into the reality you actually want? The choice, as always, is yours.